For those who know Grant, he doesn't need a big introduction. He's a very practical man and very down to earth. And I have to say, with an extensive experience in the construction industry from a developer's perspective, very much so in recent years. I had the pleasure of meeting Grant through Uncle Bob. If you haven't met Uncle Bob yet, you need to say hello to him, because he is a networker I can only aspire to be as he is, helping people to connect with each other. But back to Grant, we met about 18 months ago properly, and the proposition then was for Grant to help to bring together a national network of industry leaders in construction, particularly taking this from Tier 1, from the developers, who could then help to influence, support and engage the wider network, Tier 2, Tier 3, our builders and contractors and so forth, to think about doing things together. And this is against a backdrop of many construction companies and some developers setting up their own training academies to different levels of success, and recognizing that actually it doesn't work if it's all in one place. It just doesn't, because of course buildings are everywhere and national organizations operate nationally. So I think this is part of our movement to understand the national context and how we help employers to help us as educators design things to meet employers' needs nationally. I'm going to hand over to Grant. Thank you.
Checks in the post. Well, good morning, everybody. I'm digitised, so I'm going to give it a go and see how this works. I'm not used to working on digital notes. So, good morning, Grant Findlay. Thank you for the introduction, Ruth. I have been Ruth'd, I have been bobbed, and I'm an engineer. I've got the knack, so I think I'm probably tick all the boxes this morning. I'm not here to talk about the Pan London Construction Career College particularly, but I'd be more than happy to talk to anyone who's interested over lunch. My brief this morning was to, I guess, a bit of a response to what John's talked about in terms of business skills from an employer's perspective. But I never worked to my brief, so I'm not going to talk just about business skills, because actually business skills are unique to every business, whether you're in different sectors or in different companies and how they compete against each other. But I am going to talk about employability skills, which is a phrase that's come up already. And I'm going to talk about what I look for in young people when I recruit them into my business, or frankly, what I look for anyone when I recruit them into my business, but particularly young people. Andrew just reminded me of a piece in Construction Inquirer last week by the chief executive of Balfour Beatty, a chap called Leo Quinn, who announced that by 2050 there will be no construction workers on construction sites in this country. The industry will be completely digitised, automated, and be built by robots. The worrying thing is Leo is the chair of the Skills Working Group for the Construction Leadership Council. So whether that means he's trying to do himself out a job or not, we'll see. But that vision he portrays is one that is actually a reality. It's coming to fruition. And therefore, I'll echo Lord Baker's initial comments that the digitisation, the digital revolution, is impacting even the most traditional of trades in our industry. I do have some slides, hopefully they'll work. Right, the world of work. You're engaging our young people of this country towards the end of their educational life as they make that transition from a very environment that's very nurturing, supportive, where their time is managed and controlled, into a life which is frankly about autonomy, self-management, self-time management, where individuals have much greater control over their own actions and destiny. As educators, who is your customer? Is your customer your employer who pays your salary? Is it your students who derive the benefit of what you train, the things you train them in? Or are the funding bodies who give you the money to spend? I think we've established this morning, thankfully, and I almost was afraid to get up to speak because everyone who's spoken before has echoed my sentiments. I think we've established that I'm your customer. The employer is the customer for the efforts you put into training all these wonderful young people each and every day. I should really want to acquire the products of your hard labours. The individuals you train and develop should be exactly the type of talent I need for my business to bolster my capability and capacity as a business. They should be able to fit right into my business from day one and feel that they are making a contribution, a very important part for them. They should increase my knowledge of new digital technology, and they should be prepared to challenge my status quo. However, regrettably, that isn't the experience we find when we recruit young people. Too many are entering employment not being provided with the basic skills required of today's employers. They're not aware of how business works, and they're not reliable in their commitment to work. And frankly, the only challenge they provide to my status quo is the added burden of having to retrain them from scratch, or even worse, removing them from our business, having gone to the effort of recruiting them. That experience applies across recruitment, whether it comes from school, FE or higher education, so don't feel it's just a problem for one particular part of the education establishment. So what might we do to start to address this? I think as employers and educators, we probably have two completely different perspectives of the world of work and of each other, frankly. We view each other with caution, probably because we don't understand each other. And when we've tried to engage in the past and get together and pair up, we simply can't seem to hit it off more often than not. Aside from my 12 years in primary, then secondary education, and then 5 years in higher education, which was a good Scottish degree of 4 years with a year in industry, and I know I don't look old enough, I have engaged with education in the course of doing business in construction for the last 17 years. As a young engineer, regularly visiting primary and secondary schools to highlight the dangers of construction sites in localities to children, but increasingly involved in raising the profile of the industry and the variety of careers it has to offer. In the last few years, particularly since being involved with Bob, in fact, at London 2012 on the Olympics, and a real focus on apprenticeships and engagement with further education, and most recently working with the University of Technical College, UTC in Westminster, as part of the Employer Alliance there. So I've got some experience of education engagement. However, even I find it difficult to engage with you. You speak a language, and I've heard it this morning, of acronyms, qualifications, funding routes, that frankly I simply do not understand. Martin thankfully has demystified some of that for me today, and I actually go away much wiser at the end of the day, so thank you for that. You try and fit things into term times and fundable course lengths when my demands on time are entirely different. You're pretty inflexible. I feel I'm going to be booed off at some point. You struggle to find enough skilled and experienced people who can be the role models and the trainers for young people in our profession. And your focus often feels biased towards funding and not to the product, those being employable students. Don't get me wrong, we employers are far from perfect also. We're busy people, we lack time, we prefer plain speaking, we don't understand how your business model works, and frankly, we shouldn't have to. We generally know what we want, but we find it hard to articulate that to you. But when we ask for it and are able to articulate it, you either can't or won't provide it for us. In business, we don't mind paying things for add value to our business, but frankly, we do expect that the taxes we pay as taxpayers have been properly spent on educating young people in the skills that we require. Some of us, in fact many of us, are willing to donate our time in supporting education to help to improve, and I'm sure you've all got great stories of employer engagement in this room, but we often don't know how to help. There must be a way for us to work closer together to improve the quality and scope of what's been offered to our young people to make them better employees. So what I'm looking for in new young recruits is absolutely influenced by my own experiences, so it's probably best I tell you a little bit about construction. So, the construction sector in the UK employs 2.6 million people, that's 8% of the total UK workforce. There are over 273,000 firms, 273,000 employers in the construction industry in the UK. So I'm obviously not going to be able to represent every employer's requirements this morning. That means the average employer is less than 10 people. The majority of the employers are indeed sole operators or SMEs, and remarkably, according to the ONS statistics last year, only 58 firms had over 1,200 employees. So a very diverse, disparate sector, unlike many of the sectors which operate in the UK. However, construction is everywhere, it's in every location, it's all around us, made up of thousands of employers, and therefore, whilst it might be difficult to engage with construction employers, they're everywhere. This slide shows the CITB's construction growth figures for the next 5 years, predicting that construction output will rise. I think this was pre-election, but I don't believe it's changed, and a growth of 179,000 jobs in the sector. This is only but a small part of the growth of number of employment opportunities we'll see in the sector. These figures are just about the growth and the spend that's going to be made in the public and private sector over the next 5 years. On top of that, you need to add retirement. We typically retire about 12% of the workforce every 5 years, so there's another 300,000 jobs to be created in the next 5 years. And then the impact of Brexit, whilst as yet unknown, we currently employ 20% of the UK's construction workforce is from Europe. And therefore, let's say, for the sake of argument, we lose half of that, there's another 200,000 jobs. So we're looking at something like 800,000 opportunities in the next 5 years, which is tens of thousands of new starts every week for the next 5 years. So with 1,000 graduates through Construction Career College last year, there's quite a long way to go to try and help address the skills gap. And that also means lots of opportunities for young people in construction. I'm not going to talk about construction all the way through, I promise you. I'm going to try and touch on general business skills. Construction is not about hard hats and yellow vests. We saw some slides at the beginning with construction courses with hard hats and yellow vests. In fact, there's one there, and I was trying to avoid having one. The construction sector is hugely diverse. Yes, we employ engineers and designers and architects. We also employ nurses. We employ lawyers. We employ accountants. So the number of career pathways into the construction sector are huge and varied and require a huge variety of skills and experiences. The industry is very cyclical, and that has been a barrier to entry in the past. Young people feel let down by going training, getting into the industry and then losing jobs. And will that change? I suspect it won't. It's affected by a political and economic environment. But cyclical in sort of regional places and in regional locations and in subsectors within the sector overall. The average number of employees remains largely stable unless we were to hit another sort of big recession as we did in 2008, where we lost about 10% of the workforce. We're seeing an increasing drive for change in the sector, driven by lack of skills. It's been talked about already today. We're seeing innovations in materials, methods and strategies, and that can only, whilst it might not end up in completely people-free construction sites, it can only change the nature and the requirements of training over the next few years. So, for me, I'm all about the basics and doing them well. As those being the foundations for career and personal development. And when I say basics, I don't mean basic, simple skills. What I mean are the core skills that we require in the industry, delivered well, by people who really understand what that means and that they preferably have some experience in the industry themselves so they can give of their time and their knowledge and experience to learn, coach, mentor and teach others. We've heard it already today, but a good grasp of maths and English is absolutely fundamental. Every employee must be able to understand written instructions and verbal instructions in the form of drawings, specifications, manuals, and also, more importantly, to record what they've done. We are an industry that now relies on self-certification, and therefore the record keeping by individuals across all disciplines and all levels is absolutely fundamental. We're also an industry that works collaboratively. We don't have lone working. It's almost non-existent in construction, and therefore people need to be comfortable working in teams and working collaboratively. And that's I'll come to behaviours in a short next, but that ability to work in teams and take direction and give feedback is really important. Our workplace is a heavily regulated environment, both from a health and safety perspective and environmentally. And whilst the employers will set up the structures and the organisations to deliver that well, you may or may not be aware that the health and safety regulations, environmental regulations, place legal responsibilities on individuals. And more often than not, recruiting young people into the industry, they're not aware of their own personal legal responsibilities. And that fundamentally has to be part of that education piece for me. I'm looking for people who can be proud of what they do. I'm really proud of what I do in construction. I'm really looking for young people to join the industry and really take pride in the quality of what they deliver, whatever form that takes. Time is money, and we strive to get things right first time. So avoiding rework, repairing defects and errors is straight off the bottom line of any business or off the budget for a public sector organisation. So the understanding the principles of quality control in whatever form that may take in the industry you work in is really important to me. Getting the tasks right First time, preparing to do it, doing it well, and recording what's been done. That is a fairly simple way of work these days in the industry. In whatever industry you're training, it's absolutely essential to understand the basic technical skills currently used in that industry. In construction, we simply have not got that right. It's not a new problem. We've been wrestling with it for certainly since I joined the industry in the early 90s. And the longer we put off addressing it and dealing with it, the greater the skills gap is becoming between what education is delivering and what employers want. Too many of our construction students are still being trained in what are referred to as the biblical trades. We heard them mentioned earlier: painting and decorating, bricklaying, and carpentry and joinery. And I'm not saying these are not important, and they will lead to employment outcome for some. I've not put a brick on a building in London for 15 years. We don't lay bricks in London. Some people lay bricks, house builders lay bricks, but commercial building, of which makes up the bulk of the construction turnover in the UK, don't use bricks. We use blocks, admittedly, but not bricks. So, although my colleague from the Brick Development Association will tell you, but we're using different techniques. We're getting the same effect in a different way now because with different new prefabrication techniques. So, but my point there is really we're training lots of people in skills that are important, but they're not the only skills we need in construction. If you looked around yourself on the way to this venue today, you will have likely seen buildings made out of, or being constructed from reinforced concrete, from steel, being wrapped in cladding systems which are panelised. They might have been bricks, they might have been glass, they might have been aluminium systems. Internally, we'll fit the buildings out with dry line panels, that's not plasterwork. Modular wiring looms that connect the electrics and the control systems together, and very sophisticated building systems management systems. And yet we're training very, very small numbers of people in those trades. We need more training in modern methods using innovative materials, innovative techniques. This training needs to incorporate what's important to government and private sector developers now, which is energy efficiency, sustainability, and the environment. It needs to cover the increasing use of digital technology in construction. We design all our buildings on CAD now, and we use BIM, Building Information Modelling, to actually prepare ourselves for building buildings, costing buildings, and managing buildings after they're completed. An increasing adoption of prefabrication, automation and robotics are making the industry faster and more efficient. I want my young employees to know about these new ways and to challenge how I do things in my business so that my business can be better. I was delighted to hear John mention behaviour earlier. This is, for those who are film buffs will recognise, this is Lord of the Flies 1963 version. I always put attitude and behaviours at the top of my list when I'm recruiting. You can teach technical competence or incompetence, you can close skill gaps technically, but more challenging for me is to address attitudes or behaviours which don't align with the culture of my business. A huge behavioural issue for us in society, which has a significant impact on construction, is the use of recreational drugs and alcohol. You can be a lawyer or a doctor and be on drugs. You cannot work in the construction industry and continue to take drugs. We have a policy of random screening across all the construction industry, and if a young person or any person is discovered to have drugs in the system, that will more than likely be the end of their career. It's that significant. So your help in getting that message across is really important. It's a zero tolerance to drugs and alcohol in construction because of the potential significance on your life and the life of others working around you if your performance was impacted. When I'm recruiting, I'm looking for positive behavioural traits that ensure new starts fit into life on my construction projects. I'm looking for confidence, we heard about that earlier, initiative, being able to demonstrate that somebody's had the wherewithal to get up off the backside and go and find some construction experience, to go and get a summer job or a bit of experience before they come and see me, so they can get an understanding of how they fit into the bigger picture. I'm looking for respect for self and others, listening and being prepared to take advice. Have they worked with other peers? Have they worked with other youngsters in the course of their education or their training? Personal awareness is really important, a knowledge of themselves, where they have strengths and how they might benefit me, but also what areas of development they require help with, and a sense of ambition to learn and move onwards and upwards through my business. That's absolutely super critical. Collaboration skills I've talked about, working in teams. Do they have hobbies that are team related? I'm looking for somebody who's inquisitive and can solve problems. So looking for problems, looking for solutions, and bringing those ideas to me and my business. And I'm looking for reliability. In an environment where we are largely autonomous and don't put huge levels of supervision, looking for people who can be reliable, they turn up on time, and they do a good job. Not big asks, and we all know those are the sort of things we look for in colleagues in work and in life. Money's a bit of a dirty word generally, but let's be honest, whatever your politics, there's no denying that success of business and the UK economy rests on cash. Whether you're employed in the public sector, publicly listed companies or privately owned companies, the objective is to spend money wisely and efficiently to get the most from it. In the case of the public sector, that is delivering excellent public services for a budget. In the case of the private sector, the objective is to make a modest profit, hopefully, which can be reinvested in improving and developing the business. Now, I'm not expecting all students to be taught economics, but the basics of inputs to any activity and their costs, and the understanding how value is created and the gap between cost and value being profit or money to reinvest, either through the value through sales of products or delivery of services. That kind of basic grasp of those commercial parameters is really quite an important part of joining any business. Every employee is delivering something for a customer, so an understanding of what a customer is. And go back to my first slide, whether you're stacking shelves in a supermarket, or a factory worker producing a component, or the office worker taking a call, the way in which they deliver that service will influence whether the customer comes back for more, and you have a growing business and a growing reputation, or whether they don't, and you have to go and find new customers. So the principles of commerce and customers are really important. And I talked about quality earlier. Time is money, and so an understanding of how long tasks should take, how they can be made more efficient, and how that allows greater quality or productivity are the basics of the time-cost-quality dilemma, which most of us will be familiar with, certainly through life experience, if not through the theory. Employment's not always carried out at a fixed location. Certainly in construction, we're fairly nomadic. Construction is a project-based business. We go where the customer wants his project or her project to be delivered, and therefore employees must be prepared to be flexible in location and approach to travel. The pace at which employees move from location to location can be anything from a few hours to many months. But construction generally requires employees to travel extensively throughout their career. Flexibility, thus, is a key attribute when recruiting anyone to join the industry. John referenced Hinkley earlier. Well, Hinkley, a big power station, as you know, if that ever gets built, will require 20,000 reinforced concrete workers in the southwest. You could probably count on one hand the number of reinforced concrete courses being delivered in colleges in the construction departments, colleges around the UK. There's a huge opportunity there to deal with that one. For those young people who have itchy feet, the opportunity to travel very far afield is a very real opportunity, not just in construction, but in many other sectors now, where globalisation is levelling out the technical standards across international boundaries. Globalisation really does affect my industry through extensive supplier networks in many countries, through the ability to use the internet to work across different time zones to generate greater outputs, and through web marketing to attract global customers. Despite Lord Baker's comments earlier about requirements of language, an ability to speak other languages is actually very important in construction. It will open up a whole world of possibility for supplier and customer engagement in other countries, which is incredibly helpful in terms of building those collaborative working relationships that we need in our industry. Remarkably, one of the most significant transitions from education to employment is probably one of the easiest things we should be able to deal with, which is the working day. Generally, I don't go to work at 9 o'clock and finish at 4 o'clock. That's not how it works. Here in London, construction site starts at 8 o'clock and finishes at 6. That's governed by planning conditions. If we could work longer, we would. If we're working underground or in less urban areas, longer working days, shift working and night working are not unusual. And whilst we work Monday to Friday, we also work Saturday mornings. And as you'll notice, there's no such thing as public holidays in the construction sector. They're usually the days in which we close all the major railway stations and do lots of works. I can tell you spending Christmas Day at a major London railway station is not to be recommended, certainly not for your family. You should think about helping our young people make that transition from the relatively short teaching day to the much longer working day. Why not change course start and finish times, make the training day more like a working day? I'm sure there are commercial challenges to that, but this will be hugely beneficial in improving people's readiness for work. The construction sector is a real diversity issue, been largely dominated by white males, a bit like myself, for many years. And this has changed significantly in the last couple of decades, but there's still some considerable way to go to reflect the diversity of the UK population. Well, we cannot change diversity alone. I really need your help in attracting a more diverse talent pool to your courses, such that I have a greater diversity of students to choose from when recruiting. I do firmly believe in getting the best person for the role, so we won't be positively discriminating, but I really want a diverse selection of the very best people and best talent to choose from. I think this is an area of joint working that we can hopefully move forward together. So, what's next? I reckon nothing I have told you, you do not already know. Many of you in the room will already be dealing with this proactively by getting employer engagement. I don't doubt that. However, we do sometimes struggle to convert what we know to be right into positive course for action, positive change. Everyone here recognises that educators and employers need each other. We need to work better together if we're going to be able to offer young people training in the right skills and attributes that are required in the modern working environment. This will make our students more employable and help us to redress the skill shortages we certainly have across my industry. As employers, need to take some ownership of solving the problem. We cannot rely on someone else fixing it, on relying on you fixing it. We need to play a part in that solution. And a plug, if you're interested in the Pan London Construction Career College and construction careers, then we can offer access to thousands of construction employers through links we have with the UK's largest employer member network. We're looking for training partners to work with us to deliver new course content tailored to modern methods of construction, what the employers require, and delivering quality outcomes for our future employees. Thank you. And the technology work. I am digitised. Thank you, Roger.
Can I say, Grant, thank you very much for that. At the beginning, I said what colleges need are employers who state their requirements very, very clearly. Well, you've done exactly that, and in a totally uninhibited way. And I think that's important. That's exactly what colleges need from employers. So thank you very much for that. Ruth, I just think there's something you want to add.
I think just picking up some more signposting from Grant, thank you. Claire, you'll remember, who didn't stand earlier, sitting at the front there. I'll just highlight once more, Claire. You may wish to speak to her about our pilot in reinforced concrete. I never knew what RC frame was until about 18 months ago, so definitely worth a conversation. And just to reference that the DFE consultation on T-levels and pilots will involve the Career College network specifically. I think, as Professor Martin Doles said earlier, we are doing what we are told is the future of technical education in the UK. So as pioneers, we're going to be invited more formally to inject into that. John Evans described one example of that, which is kicking off with the pilot on work placements in September at Yeovil College. But I alert colleagues in the room to the fact that I'm meeting DFE officials on the 19th of July to pick up that planning, and I will come back to you after that. We did hope that a DFE representative would be with us today, but unfortunately their communication protocols with the new minister prevent it before the 19th of July. So we're grateful to Martin, so thank you. Roger.
I must say, in my days in DFE, we were allowed to go to conferences, but times have clearly changed. And then we move on to Bev Jones, who's in the Career Colleges team. She's going to talk to us particularly about the digital strategy of the Careers Colleges. I'm told she's an award-winning.
She is, Roger. I'm looking at my colleague who is pointing me back, so we're changing
Sorry.
the timing to, I'm looking at Andrew. To swap them over, to swap over, is that? No, he's currently down unless there's been any secret arrangement. I'm just checking. No, we're on track. So it is Bev, you're quite right.
Right.
We're a month's
The
friend.
chair's always right.
Sure, it's always right.
So, Bev, come and tell us all about it.